thanks again so much for joining today. Today's presentation is all about an agent survey results for 2022. So every single year we conduct a massive survey. We've got the largest network in the industry of independent insurance agents, and so we find this responsibility of just trying to understand what these agents are doing. You probably saw a couple of emails go out from either David or myself that told you a little bit about what we're doing in this. So we're gonna hit that here in just a second. But real quick, just for anybody who may not be familiar with Appulate, I'm gonna go through who we are, what we do from a real high level. But first, before we get into that, I wanted to introduce David Long. He is our carrier specialist. He's joining me today. And I am John Yarbrough, MGA and wholesale specialist at Appulate. So David, thank you so much for joining today. I just wanted you to say hello and maybe introduce yourself a little bit.
Oh, hi, everybody. So David Long, I've been in the market, the industry that is, for maybe 20, 25 years. And gosh, I've been on the heavy integration side. I've been on the pure application side. I've done services work, been there, lived it, done it, even on the operations side. So welcome. Glad you're here.
Thanks, David. So real quick, again, we're going to kick off this with just talking about who Appulate is. For those who aren't familiar with us, Appulate, we're a technology company. We've been around for now, I think right on the dot, 17 years. I think we're about to celebrate our company birthday here in a few days. And again, we've been doing this long enough to have accumulated the largest network of independent agents in the country. And I'm going to bring up a slide that digs into that a little bit more. But we love to do these annual surveys to learn a lot about these agents. It's really what helps us drive our technology. It's what helps us communicate what has been effective in the industry, whether that may be what kind of technology are agents interested in, what lines of business are they writing, trying to track trends. There are obviously some companies out there that do a lot with just data, but we didn't want you guys to have to pay a bunch of money to get some of that information. So we did it ourselves, and we thought that this would be really cool to share with you. So, I think it is really cool. I am kind of a nerd about data, especially statistics. So this is just going to be so much fun for me to go through this information. And as we're going through it, we're going to try to hit this at a pretty high level. We've got some analysis of how we looked at this data and what we learned from this data. So as we're going through this presentation, again, please feel free to ask us any questions and we can dig into this a little bit deeper. But today, what we do and where we place ourselves in the industry is we provide this insurance platform, if you will. I sometimes call it a submission management system, where agents can start from any agency management system. We've very specifically connected to more than 80 different agency management systems, but as long as an agency management system can produce in a Accord form or Accord data, we're sucking that data out of their agency management system into our platform, and then giving the agent the ability to then interact with any market that they choose to, and hopefully we're connected to them in such a way that we can make that a streamlined process. So we're not connected to every single market out there, but we're certainly connected to hundreds of them. And our goal is to just always increase the amount of available markets and lines of business within our platform. Even if you've got your own portal, we can send agents directly to your system with all of their core data to automatically input all that information. So there's no manual keying of information. And then, of course, there's a lot of companies that are now producing APIs to build that right within our system, giving agents full transparency into the product and completely automating all of the underwriting, rating, quoting, and binding process from our system and connecting into yours. So I'm not going to get into that too much today. That's not what the webinar is about. But this is relevant because, of course, there's a couple ways that we try to get the data that we're going to be sharing with you today. One is our annual survey, which I mentioned. We send out email blasts. We put some really cool prizes out there to entice agents to answer the questions in our survey. We get a massive response from that. And then, of course, we've got about 300,000 users in our system. About 160,000 of them are subscribed to our email list, where they want to hear about products and programs in our system. And then, of course, they want to hear about updates in our own system and what Appulate is doing. So we keep them informed, and then once a year we ask them to do the survey, and it's probably actually our most clicked on and opened email that we actually send out, which is very interesting. So out of these independent agent users, about 35,000 agencies is what we estimate is in our platform, and that's about 80% of the industry total. So of course, all of the stuff that we do ends up turning into 245% average submission count increase and a bunch of really cool stuff that we do. Again, we're not getting into that too much today. It's all about the data and talking about what agents are doing. So with that being said, the next thing I wanted to talk about, actually, I'm going to kick this over to David because he is so much better about these numbers than I am. This is very interesting stuff. So David, do you mind taking us through this premium analysis in Appulate?
Sure, Andy. So let's go through this. Everyone's been asking us, at least since I've been here and Johnny's been here longer, exactly what does it mean market-wise, being Appulate. Now, from that perspective, we wanted to give you a background to show you what types of a market and or markets that we serve so that you understand the type of agencies, the type of agents, and how the data that came back is relevant to you. So we've got about $1 billion inbound premium, and we've got from surveys and from looking at the data in the system, a 25 to 45% bind rate, which of course we don't control it as an insurtech, but those that are on our platform are telling us that's the range in which they're receiving their binds. So with that, and 240,000 submissions a year, if you look at a 30% bind rate, you've got a $3.6 billion market of premium that's flowing through here. So when you look at the numbers, you've got a $3.6 billion market, you've got $1 billion bound. If we were to say it was 25%, that number balloons. If we were to say it's higher than 30, you'd probably question where is it, because that's a pretty high number. So we kept it at 30 to make sure it looks like it's a reasonable number and that you can trust the data. Best performance, so you're going to see some of these agents have gotten very high submissions to certain carriers. So if you look at, say, AmTrust, we got a $70 million bump in that new premium. You're going to see that there's some markets that carriers do very well in compared to others. It may be different based on market, but it's a substantial market and the data reflects that. So we want you to be comfortable with what you're going to see statistically. So John, if we can go to the next slide. When you think about who these agents are, Appulate works from the agent level. So let me say what that means. So you're looking at a chart that represents agency statistics, but it's from the agent view. We went directly to the agents, the people in the field who are the ones beating the street, digging up this new business, and asked them information not only about what they do, but what their agency does and how they feel it's performing. So when you see these stats, when you see any of this data, it's at the most granular level that you can get within that agency. Johnny, anything you can think of to add on to that?
No, I think that this is really critical when we start talking about potential in the system, right? We've got a number where we're saying, hey, here's how much premium we're seeing come through the system, what we're seeing bound, but we recognize that there is so much more out there, right? So we're always, like I mentioned before, we're looking for new lines of business and products to fit them and new markets in the system. And probably one of the top questions I get is obviously, what is the ROI on this, or what is the actual potential? If we were to sit, put a product on our platform for a particular line of business and send out a bunch of emails, what kind of response do we think we're going to get? How much premium do we think we're going to get? And there may be a difference between what we're seeing in our system and what agents are saying they write on a regular basis. So we try to figure out what that difference is for that potential. So I get really excited about that.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that I'm looking at the stratification here of the average written premium here by agency. Yeah. And what's interesting is we definitely have a mix of small, medium, and large. And actually, the large is much bigger than I thought. And it's because there's present penetration in the large agencies. Agents that choose to use the software, it may not be what was forced down from the top at the agency level, but it's still used within those agencies. So it's very interesting. But that stratification that you're seeing on that chart on the right, those are the types of agents and the size of the agencies that this data is coming back from. So we wanted to make sure you had some basis in understanding the agents a little bit better.
Perfect. And with that being said, we had a question come in, how many agents essentially participated in the study, which is a really great question. So we sent this out to, of course, tens of thousands of agents, and we had a great response. A lot of this data is coming from different places, both from within our system. So we've got about 160,000 or so that are pretty active on a regular basis all across the country. Thousands of agents came back to us in this survey alone, and then we're combining that with different surveys we've done over the past 5 years, where again we're talking thousands of agents each year who are participating in this study to try to analyze what the trends are and then get a good number of things like this. Well, what is the average premium agencies write annually? And that can change each year, and so we're trying to track that and get the best averages there. We've looked at outside sources of like how they do surveys, and we've hit well above the mark on what is a typical response. So hopefully that answers. I know it's somewhat indirect, but there's a lot of kind of factors here to consider. David, do you have anything else to maybe add to that?
Well, I think it's fair to be direct. I mean, our response was as far as who we kept data-wise, because we found organizations that we didn't feel comfortable with, because some people responded with Gmail addresses, some people didn't respond with corporate emails and things like that. So we're at the 1% mark. Most of these surveys that go out to benchmark as opposed to say look at something else relative to say being a net promoter score or something like that, because the surveys are long and arduous, typically your response rate's lower. So the market says 0.5 to 1%, we're over 1%. So
yeah,
it's a pretty solid number. Statistically, we're in a good place as far as the number of responses.
Right. And actually the next thing we're going to get into here is agent demographics and submission data. So hopefully this will kind of expose a little bit more about the agents that were represented in the survey and the agents that are in our system. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to this next slide here, and I'll hit these fairly quickly. But this first slide here is agency location. So this is, of course, what we're analyzing both from the survey and from what we're seeing in our system. But these numbers here are directly Appulate users within our system. There were a number of agents that responded to our survey and actually weren't really familiar with Appulate, and so that was really interesting. So we had some numbers there of folks who responded still to the survey and gave us good information. When we compared this list to lists like what states do you write in, it was pretty identical. And what we're finding is most of the time agents are writing within their state. I think within the top 10, I think number 9 was they write in all states is what they indicated. And so we thought that this was a better number to show you of where these agents are located to kind of give you an idea of what that spread looks like. Again, we've got about 300,000 in our system, and so this is all over the country. David, anything to add to that before I go to the next slide?
No, I'm sure people are eager to get to the meat.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, so let's do that. So submissions for quote processing in each month. This was actually a question, so this is not coming from within our system, but across the industry as a whole. Agents basically letting us know, the question was, all right, how many submissions do you process each month? How much of that is new business versus how much of that are renewals? So this is just kind of an interesting slide. And just by the way, I wanted to mention we are recording this, so happy to send this out afterwards so you guys can take a look at this. And we're also going to be happy to meet with you. So if you want to schedule some time with David or myself, there's a lot more data that we've got, and we're trying to pack as much of it into this this webinar as we can. But feel free to contact us directly if you want a breakdown of anything specifically. We're happy to try to dive into that the best we can. So I'll leave this up for a moment and hop to the next screen. So this is where stuff starts to get really interesting. So top lines of business. So again, I'm going to leave these up just for a moment, and then I'm going to keep going down, and then I've got some slides where we're comparing things, like comparing how this looked versus from last year to this year, what things have changed, which lines of business have agents said that they write more than others. So in this slide here, and I've got a couple more, I've actually got the top 50 here. So these are the top 20 lines of business that agents have said in the survey that they write on a regular basis. So that was what the question was. They were able to go in there and answer by clicking any line of business they write on a regular basis to give us a concept of what that looks like. So we've got the percentages here, and the percentages to the far right where I've got plus and minus, that's compared to December of 2020. This survey was conducted in December of 2021. So over that year period, these are the percentage changes of numbers of responses for each line of business. So I'm going to hop to the next slide here.
Yeah, but it's cool to see the umbrella. Umbrella jumped 9%.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I've got a slide here and a couple where I have the top largest changes in percentages, which was actually very interesting. And on here, you're going to see a couple times where it says new, like habitational apartments, habitational condos, special event liability. Those are showing up as new. That was really, really interesting, where agents marked a new line of business. It didn't really show up in the top 50 last time we conducted it. So that was very interesting there. And here's the last one where we've got the top 50. Again, another new one there for childcare. And then I'm going to hop to this slide, which is the largest changes in percentages from December to December 2020 to 2021. This is really, really interesting. And prior to the survey, David and I were talking about this, and I said, you know, I've been to a couple conferences in the fall. That was in like October, November. I said, you know, I haven't been able to stop having conversations about cyber liability and flood and trucking particularly. So this was really interesting to see that not only are agents saying that they're writing this more when we're comparing the data, but when I'm talking to MGAs, wholesalers, and David, I expect probably the same when you're talking to carriers. A lot of these lines are coming up in conversations quite a bit. And I think there's a lot of reasons behind that, and we could probably spend a lot of time on this slide alone. So I'm not going to do that right now. If you guys want to contact us and we can talk about this in the conversations we've been having. I mean, quite honestly, I'm probably talking to 7 different MGAs right now about flood products and about the same number for cyber liability. It's just unreal how much we're seeing a trend shift with some of these. And then some of these were pretty interesting. A motorcycle is the second largest change in percentage. I'm not really sure what the reason is for that, but if someone on here's got a motorcycle product and they can explain that to me, I would absolutely love to hear it. But David, anything to add to this one?
Yeah, it's definitely unique on the motorcycle side, but it's cyber liability. A lot of people are talking about it, and it's interesting that at the same time, everybody's talking about the industry saying it's a tough one because we've got more cyber risk than ever. So figuring out how that's going to fall out as far as growth of the policies, but also changing of the product. The products are in flux on a weekly basis. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting path forward journey on the cyber side.
This is probably one of my favorite things to see each year is I look for this every single time. I want to compare it. I want to see what things have changed over the last year and maybe try to get a projection on what's going forward. And I think this impacts the conversation a lot. Again, when someone says, hey, how is this product going to do in your system? Well, if I can say, well, umbrella is showing up in the top 10 everywhere, including in the largest changes in percentage, it's a really good time to be offering an umbrella product. It just is, and we can statistically see that. So very interesting slide here. So we'll continue. This also is another comparison slide where we ask them, what would you like to write more of versus what are you currently writing? So we were able to ask 2 different questions there to pull this data and compare these. Again, very interesting because some of these are certainly in the same top 5, 6, but some of these you can see the fluctuations there. And again, I'm sure there's quite a few of you guys who've got products that fit these and would be interested in seeing this kind of slide here. David, I think you might have something to add to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say if you look at the percentages, of course, they're not directly correlated, right? You look on the right-hand side, that's the percentage of respondents that say that's what they're writing today. On the left-hand side is where we see growth that's going to happen just in the market in general and definitely on our platform. And I'll show you on the next slide when I cover that. I'll talk about some of the percentages of growth for some of those lines. But it is interesting that commercial auto already being 74% of what's being written, something's driving additional value and or demand for that, right? And workers' compensation, we know that's pretty consistent anyway, because that's probably one of the first policies, that and GL, that you would get for a business. That makes perfect sense. But yeah, again, commercial umbrella has been kind of under the table for the last few years, but it's continually climbing up on the list, right? I mean, only 59% write it today, but there's
Yeah,
a wonderful number 6, 26% want to write more of, which is equal to commercial package. So that tells you something.
right. Absolutely. Yeah, and one of the things that we do in our system, just to kind of tangentially talk about Appulate again, but in our system, we are able to do a little pop-up that can occur where, let's say someone is writing a commercial umbrella, or they're writing personal auto or something like that, and it fits a class code or an address or something that you have a product that is similar to that, and you want to offer it. So for example, if you're doing homeowners and you've got a flood product, and you know that, hey, if they're in this address or this location, we want to offer them a flood quote, we can do that within our system. And as soon as they put in that information, boom, they can get a little pop-up once they submit that says, hey, you should check this out over here. And we've been able to really successfully drive upsell of products and a huge percentage change in submission activity from little tools like that alone. And so I like to use data like this to try to help drive that. Anyways, so David, I think you wanted to talk about this one a little bit. You said on this next slide, this kind of was still applicable. Again, this is the survey versus submitting through Appulate. So a little bit different here, but a very interesting comparison once again. I find this really interesting in the same kind of conversation I was just having, where in Appulate, we've been doing workers' comp probably the longest. We've got maybe 120 markets in workers' comp today. And so when I look at that, but then I see it as number 3, and we've got GL and commercial auto, where surveys are saying that that's what agents want to write more of, then naturally we should have a lot more markets and products available for those. So there's certainly a gap with some of these where agents are writing something, but we don't have product availability for those specifically. So that's really, really interesting, because there's a massive potential in those gaps for products to be available. David, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so like professional liability, we definitely have white space there. But when I look on the right-hand side,
Yep.
of what has been covered, other than professional liability, some of these markets seem to be growing faster than others. So it's one thing to say they want to write more. It's another thing to have growth statistics over the last 3 years that show that that is some sort of validation that what they say they want to write more of is real, right? So like a workers'
Right.
comp is fairly steady at a 3% growth year on year for 3 years, but commercial package, which is very similar to umbrella, but it's been growing at 49% over the last 3 years year on year. That's a huge level of growth, right? Truckers and motor carrier, again, don't know what's driving it, but 102% growth average year on year for 3 years. That's crazy. That's a big number.
That's wild.
Yeah, personal auto's been pretty flat, but the general liability is growing at about 29% on the platform, which, again, something that to say, I don't know that that's even one they said they want to write more of, but commercial umbrella, again, 40% year on year. Again, it's coming out of nowhere. I guess GL starting to switch over to commercial umbrella or something like that, because it's better and more expanded, or maybe small business is growing. I don't know, but something's driving that particular demand. BOP is growing at 21%, frankly. For us, that's a hole that we just need more carriers or markets. MGA is covering that, frankly. We've got room for people to grow on that particular part of the platform. Now, one thing, commercial property is growing at 30%. Again, I can't believe that commercial property, given where we're at today, is necessarily growing at that kind of rate. It's probably just because we don't have enough coverage on the platform. So again, we use more MGAs and carriers in that particular line as well.
Yeah, good point. And actually, that's a really good segue, I think, to the next section of our survey results, which tackles agent preferences and distribution trends. I think one of the biggest reasons that carriers, MGAs, wholesalers, whomever work with Appulate is because of the massive distribution opportunity. And it's not just us. I mean, there's a number of distribution players in the insurtech space right now, and they're quite successful. We have a massive footprint in here, and we wanted to analyze what are these distribution trends? What are agents trying to do? Is it just all of us over here spending a bunch of money on technology, or are agents excited about this as well? So we uncovered some really cool stuff. So I'm going to pass it over to David here to tackle some of this information.
All right. So when you think about digital and the demand for digital type services for submission, rate, quote bind, it's interesting that 64% of the participants said that they would rather work in an environment digitally that they can actually submit to more than one market in one place. Now, when you look at the blue, that is supporting going direct through the carrier portal. But what that tells you is that there's support for the number of different companies like us who are getting into that market in digital distribution versus just automation, right? And it is being driven by demand from the field. If we go to the next slide, what's interesting is that we have the question, who do you work with, or who do you like to work with most, right? Do you like to work with carriers? Do you like to work with MGAs? Do you basically want to place anywhere that you can place, right? Do you want options? And 48.5% of the respondents who are agents said that they want to work with multiple markets. So whether that be an MGA, whether or not that be a wholesaler, whether that be a carrier, they want to work with all of them. 36.9 is carriers. Not unexpected, right? So you have deep relationships with carriers, and they typically might go directly through their portal. What's interesting is the amount that want to work with multiple markets relative to the amount that want to work with carriers is at least equal, maybe a little bit less, just because carriers are also covered in I want to work with all of them. But you got pretty equal demand across both of those segments. Then you've got specific smaller slices here where people just want to work with wholesale brokers, specialty markets, PEO, MGAs, et cetera. My guess is that has to do with the type of agency and the type of line. If you're doing a lot of E&S, you don't spend a lot of time with carriers, right? You spend a lot of time in these other markets. So take from that what you will, but it looks like the demand's fairly even across working with all markets versus just working with carriers. So on the next slide, we tried to ask the question, when you're building relationships with markets, how do you do that? Where do you find the best method or channel to build those relationships? And networking was the #1 answer, and then referrals is the second. So that's old school. It's the way it's been forever, right? But what we're finding is growth in digital. So you look at search engine, you look at social media, those numbers are climbing. And what's interesting is when I look at social media, trying to get out there and see what kind of lines are out there, what carriers might have certain types of appetite, et cetera, we found people that are on Appulate, agents on Appulate, are actually making more relationships than going to social media to find those organizations, or even through search engines. So our digital marketplaces are playing a role in connecting agents with the markets that actually hold those policies, right? Who they can submit to. It's a very interesting thing. But of course, referrals, networking, and events and conferences are always going to be a big number because that's always been a core part of the industry. But digital's growing. It's a very interesting thing.
Absolutely.
Thoughts on that, Johnny? Because I know you think a lot about this.
Yeah, I do. I think quite a bit about it, and I put together a slide of some of my thoughts. So I'm going to tackle that, I think, after this next one here. But yeah, I mean, I think the key is to be diverse, right? I mean, that's the key. You still want to show up at networking conferences and have some personal relationships that you can make referrals and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I was just actually blown away to see how some of those numbers, when we conducted this, I think 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of those were very, very slim slices where it was like, well, I feel like agents are really using social media and they're really getting on to distribution platforms, but I don't have the numbers to back it up. And so now we really do. I mean, we're really seeing these numbers come out growing quite a bit. So that's really exciting.
Well, in this slide, piggybacking off of that, gives us more validation of actually what we see with analysts. So I'm sure everyone on this call, I heard analysts say, 80 or 90%, probably 90% of all agencies utilize an AMS system. And the question is always, is that number right? How do we know that number is right? Well, frankly, based on the feedback we've got from the agents, pretty darn close. 87.5% of the feedback said that they are on AMS systems. So getting those applications from that system into your MGA or carrier systems in the back end, getting through your portal or through the back end, it's a serious concern. And if you look at which AMS systems you want to try to connect with, of course, Vertafore by far has the largest market share. But you got platforms like us where you can actually go directly from the AMS to your back end without ever having to invest in that tech that would make that happen.
Right. And agents don't pay for our system too, by the way. I'm just going to pepper that in there really quickly. That's very interesting. And so you'll get agencies that use some of these other systems, and it doesn't seem like as many carriers are partnering with some of these folks, but they still want to have that experience. So I think that's why systems like AMS 360 or any of the others owned by Vertafore are skyrocketing. But yeah, David, you've got a great point with that. That's why it's so important for us to connect to as many of these as possible. And today, now we connect with all of them. So that's pretty exciting. So if it's all right, I want to go into some of the highlights that I came up with. This is based off of the pure numbers that we gathered from some of the slides you already saw, and probably some other things, and trying to just connect some dots. So cool, a bunch of pie charts, but what does this actually mean? So one of the things that David mentioned a minute ago is agents are now using distribution platforms about equally to search engines when looking for new markets. And then, of course, we're seeing how that impacts social media versus systems like Appulate, and how those things are performing. But what's really interesting is we've been saying for a long time agents really like distribution platforms, and they're obviously on them, and distribution platforms are quite successful right now, and a lot of markets are developing APIs as a result of this. But now we're actually seeing that equally to search engines, they are just as successful. That means an agent's going to find you just as frequently on Google as they're going to find you on a distribution platform, and that is absolutely huge. So when we're talking about distribution, even marketing, and where you're putting dollars behind some of those resources, this stuff is going to really impact that. So I think this is something to really pay attention to. Market distribution is more effective on Appulate than social media by a full percentage point. So one of the things we love to do is throw a bunch of marketing resources at whoever we partner with. We've got a bunch of cool stuff in our system so agents can find markets. And one of the big reasons we do that is well, obviously we want to throw even more value into what we're doing, but we know that agents are doing this. They're not just using our system to answer questions and try to reduce redundancies and keystrokes, but they do it to find markets. So they use this kind of like a shopping mall in some ways, where they'll input their data, and then depending on how that data is reflecting in our system against a market's appetite indication, an agent can learn right away within a matter of seconds whether or not it's something you're willing to take right up front, before even having to go to a next step of going to a portal and keying in more information or trying to talk to an underwriter. They can just see it right away. And so that transparency, I think, is why that is performing so well. Appulate accounts for about 70% of new markets selected amongst all distribution platforms. So there's a lot of folks out there. They're really great. A lot of them are friends of ours. So you'll never hear me say anything bad about any other distribution platforms. We're all buddies at this point. But we've been doing this for a really long time, and we're actually seeing true data that about 70% of that market selection is happening within our system. So that was really cool for us to see. Agents were able to put in these options. So when Appulate came up that much, we all gave a lot of high fives around. So that was cool. The top method agents use to find markets is networking and events and conferences. David, you nailed it there. I think some of this old school stuff, or sending out emails, a lot of people, they ask the question, all right, what's new? How can I reach agents? What's the best way to do that? And again, I think you've got to be pretty diverse. To my last point, agents are diverse about how they find markets. We've got 6 methods at or above 10%. So that's huge. So that's really important. And of course, referrals.
What's interesting is if you look at the stats, though, that came back, one of the key things that these agents were asking for was personal attention, right?
Right.
So
right.
The set I'm talking about, that fell down the list. Yep. It's not personal attention. It fell below automated quoting, instant response, and other things that are digital focused. So even their view of these conferences and the old way of doing business is starting to shift.
Yeah, and that's actually on this slide here. That's the next one. So it's a perfect time to talk about it. Do you want to kick this one off? I mean, this is such a cool slide, in my opinion.
Yeah. So if we look 2021 to 2022, and we ask these particular agents what they think are the things they would want if they were going to work with a new market, or technically work with any market. Last year was all about competitive rates, fast turnaround, but Of course, better commission. Who doesn't want more money? But they wanted online questionnaires, automated underwriting. Personal service was right there at number 9, right? Always in the top 10. It's not even in the top 10 in 2022. It's not even on the list. Core data intake. So you look at competitive rates, of course, they want to win, right? Fast go turnaround, digital. But instead of better commission, they want automated underwriting. It looks like they're looking for volume as opposed to better commissions on each individual sale, which is a big shift. It's a huge shift. When have you ever had an agent say, I'll take less commission if I can close it faster? I've never heard that yet in my entire career. They want shorter questionnaires. So they're asking for carriers and MGAs to simplify the appetite criteria and the underwriting guidelines so that they can actually spend less time on these. And part of that is small commercials really exploding, right? Everyone's trying to access that market. If it's a $500, $1,000, $4,000 policy, they don't want to spend a lot of time filling out a bunch of questions that in turn is going to cost more to them than the commission they're going to get in response. Core data intake went up, which is interesting. That automation piece went from 10 to 6. Accessing markets on a single platform stayed in the same spot. We already knew that that was something they were asking for. Binding authority and control. That's interesting. It sounds like more of them want to go edge towards the MGA space. Better commission still on the list, so I apologize. It is still on the list, but it's fallen back down to 9. And then e-signature of docs. So that all of a sudden hit the list. So you can see the shifting in the mindset towards more digital and away from traditional methods of having relationships with the carriers.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, I think a lot of it has to do with awareness, right? I mean, when you start becoming aware that this technology is out there, like for example, a core data intake with no manual entry, that's starting to be kind of a standard. If you don't have a way to ingest these forms or ingest data, an agent doesn't want to sit there and type all that in. They know that another market next to you with a similar product can ingest it in a matter of seconds. So why am I going to spend a week on something, emailing you and going back with underwriters in a manual process when I can go to 30 other markets that can give me at least an appetite indication right up front within a matter of seconds? I think that's why we're seeing this shift. And to David's point, yeah, if I were an agent and I'm only going to make $200 on something, you better believe I'm gonna go through one of those methods a lot more often than I'm gonna go through a manual process. So this has gone from being, this will be cool to build this out, to this is urgent, we need to do this. And I'm seeing a lot of markets have that kind of attitude. Here was the rest of those, by the way, David, so you can see 11 through 17. We did see personal touch show up on there at 12, but it dropped significantly. And online questionnaire, which I think used to be up there, yeah, it was number 5. That dropped down to number 11 because I think, again, agents go, yeah, cool, everyone's got an online questionnaire, but I don't want to type in all this information. I've already typed it in maybe 10 different times or at least twice. I don't want to do this again. So we try to cut that down to once, and agents get really, really excited about that. So anything else to add to these?
Yeah, I have to say, within the last 3 months, I've talked to at least 4 carriers who have had significant growth rates. I'm talking to the tune of a certain premium going up by 30 or 40%, where they said the way they did it was simplifying underwriting guidelines. They made it easier to turn around the quote, automate as much as possible so that their volumes can go up and the satisfaction of agents and the people who are applying actually feel better and get their answers faster. And that is how they're doing it. So when they say they want smaller questionnaires, I think there's a hidden demand there for them to say, hey, you need to simplify those guidelines because you're killing me.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes through automation, right? I mean, you can simplify it by trying to offer a product where I've seen folks go, well, we'll ask 10, 15 questions to keep it real short, and then we can kind of give an indication or preliminary quote, and then we're going to have them go through a binding process where we ask the rest. And it's still just a form with all the questions that could possibly need to be answered. What they're looking for is more automation, and it doesn't have to be necessarily what is considered AI, but just if-then scenarios. And we do a lot of that here, where we'll have someone say, well, we've got this class code 8810, it's clerical workers for workers' comp. We don't really need to ask about hard hats or if they're driving boats or anything like that. We know what they're doing. Let's ask them questions that pertain to that and really get to what needs to be completed so we can get them through quickly and get a quote. And so we're seeing a lot of that, and I think agents are responding pretty dramatically to it.
Yeah,
So
and
again,
like I said, I talked to him. I had one of those particular carriers went from 12 APIs to one because of the simplification. It's crazy.
wow, yeah, that's wild. Well, and so there was more I think we learned here, which was really interesting, and some of this we already touched on. First of all, agents still find instant and competitive quotes the most important feature of the market's quoting process. So I think that can't be avoided. If you're a wholesaler and you can't provide instant quotes, as long as it's competitive, as long as you're fast, and you've got some technology behind the scenes to help support that, and maybe even up front for the agent-facing portal side of this, you can dramatically change your interaction with the agent, and that is the number one most important thing. Agents want instant quotes and automated underwriting at a rate of 5 times that of just simpler questionnaires. So cool, it's really great that things are digital. I think this is to my point earlier, but we're talking 5 times how much more agents want that to be instantaneous or automated, at least to some degree, especially during the underwriting process. David, you hit this one. Agents value automated processes over commission 8 to 1. I mean, so those are the actual raw numbers, which I know we don't have a lot of that on there. I'm trying to keep it as simple and clean as possible. But when we dug into the numbers onto this, that's how they turned out, which that's huge. Agents value a quote ingested nearly twice as much to previous years, even the year before that. And we've been doing a quote ingestion for 17 years. So that kind of puts things in perspective. I mean, this is not necessarily brand new technology, but I mean, this is starting to become something that they're demanding rather than they're hoping that you have. The most requested Appulate feature on our side, and this comes from both requests in our system to the survey results, was to the ability to send data to carrier websites, and this was by double other options. We have some stuff in our system that's really, really cool, like giving an agent the ability to automate the process of requesting loss runs on behalf of their insureds. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. It's that we thought was going to be the number one thing, but turns out we've got a tool called WebLink where we can send information just over to a carrier portal, map it out the best we can. And it's not perfect because sometimes we're doing this with markets that we may not be working with or may not be connected to completely with through API or fancy stuff. But as long as we're just moving some basic data over, that's what they want. And they're, I said our system's free for agents, but some of this they're paying for it. So we're actually seeing a huge increase of agents paying for our system to have custom features. And that number one tool is just sending it through our system to an outside portal. So even in the case where we saw the data earlier where agents say they prefer to work on a carrier's website directly, a lot of them are starting an Appulate to kind of host their data, manage their submission process, and then sending it over to the carrier portal to finish out the quoting process. And that is a really smooth transaction, and it actually makes the portal look so much better once they land there and they're already at least 50% done with their data. That makes your portal just that much smoother. And then of course the last one, which we didn't really touch on this but was still really, really interesting, was 61% of agents prefer self-paced learning. So we try to spend a lot of time putting together webinars and recording those webinars so they've got something to reference. We have an online e-learning course, manuals, things like that. So we're seeing that most agents are preferring that. 26% prefer webinars. I maybe should have made that blue and bold. When we did a webinar recently for California-based trucking product, we had 300 or 400 agents show up to this webinar or register for it. And so I've had some folks who do a commercial auto product and have just as many agents show up and they're asking for trucking or asking for something else. So agents show up to these webinars in droves and they want to interact just like this, where we're having a conversation and they have a way to interact with the market directly. That's been huge. And then of course the last one is one-on-one training, which just isn't as high as we thought. But you know, when we're talking about putting resources in the right place, if we put a massive email out there or have a webinar, we want to make sure you've got resources to handle it, about 10 to 15% of agent requests for some one-on-one training. So that was pretty interesting. The last one I've got here is, do agents really use technology? So we've done a lot of research outside of our own surveys and things like that, of course, but some of the things that were really interesting, and I've actually been hanging on to this slide for the last year or two, is that 86% of agents say digital technology is vital to helping their agency grow. These are all, by the way, none of these are our statistics. These come from other companies in their surveys. 90% of agencies use an agency management system. We hit 87%, so I think we're on track there. 76% of agents feel like they're not getting the most out of their digital technology. I think we were able to break that down and explain why that might be. And agents increase their sales funnel by 20 to 30% with better technology utilization. So agents are telling folks, yeah, not only am I going to use this, but I feel like I'm making more money, I can do more things, and so this is really, really exciting. David, do you have anything to add to this? Feel free to talk about it. I've got a question that came in, so I'm going to read that very quickly.
You know, we've got limited time. We should take the questions over pontificating to our friends here.
Sure. Yeah. So the question that came in, good question. Just curious if you saw any interesting differences by role. For example, CSRs, highly valuing automation versus principals, highly valuing commission, etc. Really good question, and I think we're going to probably have to ask that question ourselves. We can tag who the type of role is in our system, and so we can see who's kind of doing what in our system. So I think anecdotally, I can say you're right. We're seeing that this improves a CSR's life quite a bit, and they're usually in here plugging in numbers, but they're doing it very quickly. I've talked to a lot of MGAs and wholesalers and larger agencies who get really excited that they can make their CSRs or agents a lot more powerful with a lot of this technology. So of course, if we're making their lives easier, so you're not having to hire 10 different CSRs to sit there manually keying information, or outsource some kind of data entry company to overnight some data into your system. If we can do that in a matter of just a click, that vastly and dramatically improves your overall operations. And I think that impacts everyone. So I think across the board, you're going to see that a CSR, it's impacting them directly, because now they went from typing in everything to hitting a button, so they're excited about it. But then, of course, the principals and executives of that company, they're not having to hire as many folks or spend as much money on resources like that, and they can spend that money doing other things like hire that CSR to reach out to the market and have that personal interaction, or hire some folks to become experts in cyber liability and what that means. And so, David, are you seeing the same kind of thing, or do you agree with me on that?
I do, and I think the question isn't binary, right? I mean, you talk to the principals, they're going to want high commission, but commission is like any other sales process. You can drive it in two different ways. It's either margin or turnover, right? So commission is a percentage of, if you have fewer transactions, you want it to be as high as possible. It looks like they're looking for volume potentially as much as humanly possible, because I don't know if it's a shift in the market, just a shift in the way they think. But you can make just as much as an increase in commission if you're have lower commission but higher volume, right? So that end, and yeah, if you had a list of 1 to 5, the CSRs would highly value automation, but they too, depending on whether or not they're licensed to sell versus just a admin agent just rekeying stuff, they want high commission too, but they probably want to make commission as easy as humanly possible to make their job easier. So it's probably a little more complex than a binary, who likes which one the best.
Yeah.
Anyway,
good.
Those are my thoughts.
Good point. Yeah, and by the way, if this is now going to be our time to take any kind of questions you might have. I mean, that was a really fantastic question. We've had a couple really good ones come through, and I hope we've hit those. Again, you can connect with us at any time. I put up our contact information here, and we're going to be sending out some emails after the webinar with our contact information, as well as the recording from today's presentation. So one of the questions I did get is, can we break this down by class code, or even break this down a little further by line of business? Great question, and the answer is yes, maybe. So we've asked about class codes, and I have a slide that talks a little bit about that. Some of it we're pulling from surveys, some of it we're pulling from within our system. So it tends to just be a mountain of data when we start pulling it for everything. So contact us and we can probably go through that a little deeper if you'd like. We'll just do our best with that. But that's a really good question.
I've
Another
got one
question.
more. Yeah, there you go. Go ahead, Johnny. I'm sorry. Yeah, I saw one more come through.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah. One more is just what kinds of trends do you expect this year, and are there any changes you expect to see in some of the data for next year? David, you want to take that? It's interesting.
What was the question again? I see a different question on the screen. That's weird.
Yeah.
Meetings got me with a different
No,
question.
it's okay. No, it's okay. Just basically, what kinds of trends are you expecting to see, or changes in some of this data you expect to see next time you conduct the survey? So that's thought provoking. I think we're going to continue to see some of like the pie charts we saw earlier, where agents are more interested in interacting with distribution platforms. We expect that to grow. I think we've seen that grow every single year. I think what they're looking for from their markets, we're going to start to see some more standardization there, and of course the same kind of trends of automation improving. I'm really excited to see lines of business. I think those are going to change slightly, but I think it's going to be some of the same kind of stuff we're seeing here with cyber and flood, and we're going to see how this year impacts lines. I don't know. I'm not sure how that's going to change. I only knew what to expect on that slightly just after spending the full year interacting with folks, and more specifically wholesalers and MGAs who are working with agents directly, and kind of gauging from their experience what they're seeing working. And so that's been a little bit more anecdotal. So again, it was just nice to see the data behind that. But what about you, David?
Yeah,
Anything?
and there's some major market trends that aren't new, right? I mean, they're still deriving from 3 or 4 years ago, and I think everyone sees the writing on the wall, whether it be analysts or carriers doing their own research. The small commercial is going to become much more of grow, I should say, more towards where we are with personal lines. I mean, anything you can do to simplify it, automate it, anything that you can do to take those low dollar policies and flow them through in a higher volume is going to be a good thing. So we're going to see a lot more of the automated rating. We're going to see a lot more of the automated quoting. We're going to see a lot of the things that happen to the personal lines, particularly auto and home, via automation or go direct to consumer, being pushed into the commercial space. Now, small commercial, the challenge you're going to have is that they try to disintermediate agents in the past, and it doesn't work for the majority of the policies, because you still need certain people to answer questions at a level of complexity. Like cyber sounds simple and easy, but then alternatively they ask questions that can't be answered by the website, right? And they have specific needs that still need to be addressed. So that's where the independent agent came back into the mix, and a lot of these distribution platforms are trying to help with that interaction between not just the agent and the carrier or MGA, but also with the agent and the actual applicant, to be able to streamline how you get all that information in the right place, answer the questions, et cetera. So I think that's going to push our trends where we expect that they would. This digital push, when we say digital, we're not trying to be, future state robots. What we're seeing is that the process just needs to be streamlined, and we've got a proof point in personal lines that has proven you can do that with the right characteristics around certain lines. And if you don't, you're going to be left behind, because no one's going to wait 2 weeks to get a response for a quote on a $1,000 policy. It just doesn't happen.
Sure.
Neither the agent nor the applicant are going to want to see that.
Yeah, well said. Did you say you had another question pop up on yours?
I did. It said, given the expansive functionality you have in the market to make lives easier, looking forward, do you think the insurers will even need their portal, or will technologies like ours replace the portal? I don't see it replacing the portal, frankly. There's some very deep relationships that are going to be tough to displace. What we're seeing is a multi-channel experience, and it goes everywhere from the CSRs in a call center all the way through technology in general. It isn't as much that the channels will consolidate. It's that the same information is available through multiple channels, and that anyone can get their answer on any channel they choose. It's more about choice. And in this instance, a little bit different. It's not just applicant choice, it's choice of the agent where they want to work. And there's some agents that say, I write 99% of my policies through one MGA or one carrier. Why would they want to mess with another technology if they don't have to? I think this multi-channel and integrating the channels is where it'll go. Johnny, I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts on that, I think. I mean, I like to use examples here, like Expedia, for example. Expedia has not replaced Delta's website. You know what I mean? So Expedia has a very specific purpose, or Kayak, or pick your favorite, but you may go there to compare rates and quotes, or to just go, I want to really fly out to Vegas this weekend. What does it look like? And who's actually got flights out that direction? And I want to be able to look at everything in one place. And that's really exciting. And then there are folks who go, nope, I only fly with American, and that's it. And so they go to the American Airlines website, and that's where they buy their tickets. So I think you're going to get different groups of people that do those things, but you're certainly seeing a larger amount of agents who are going to sites like ours, and using that kind of Expedia experience to find new markets and see what's out there. It's a way to better serve their insureds. But you don't have to, in this situation. What makes this a little bit different than my example with Expedia is you may have a product website that's just perfect today, and it gives them instant quotes, and it gives them rates, and the questionnaire is very simple and straightforward. But what we know for sure is that 90% of agents are starting from an agency management system. So they need to go from there, where their data is, to your site. And a lot of agents, 80% of them, are on our platform as well. So they're going through this flow with their data today. And so what we can do is we can take them additionally to your website, but hit them with some additional basic information up front before they do that. So at least while they've got their data there, they can know right away, again, is this something that you're willing to take, or is it declined, and what is the reason for that? What kind of questions are we going to look for? What kind of information is going to be necessary? Or let's make sure that the zip code has 5 digits, things like that. And then they get launched over to your portal and have a really nice, smooth experience. And they can manage their insured profiles a lot better. Because again, Appulate, we're not just here to have questions answered and that sort of thing, but the agent is using our tool to send those questions to their insured to collect that information. They're using it to request loss runs. They're using it to run reports and track who's done what, and give CSRs a tool to manage their daily lives. And there's a lot of stuff going on, which is why they're using it. It's not all about necessarily just the quoting process with you guys. It's about all those other kind of ancillary tasks that we can help automate. So yeah, I agree with David on that. I don't think it's going to go away. We just need to improve it and make sure everything's connected together. So with that being said, it is now 3 o'clock. Please contact us. Let's have a conversation. There's so much more information out there, and of course, so much more that can be specific to what you do and your product, and how you might be interacting with agents. Some of this may have pertained to you in a big way, some of it not so much. So let's get together and talk about it. David, thank you so much for joining us with me today. I always appreciate that.
Oh, anytime, John.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, so much for your time. Look forward to meeting with you, hopefully, and I'll send you guys an email probably either today or tomorrow once this recording is uploaded. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day and weekend.